So the only formula for us is for black people and white people to govern together. So that's the bigger picture that I see. Yes, it is true. Historically, white people have stolen in South Africa. But if you look at how the DA has governed the Western Cape, by the way, even studies by the ANC government itself have found that the DA has actually been a better government in South Africa in terms of the provinces. And I hope that spirit will actually cascade into the private sector as well, where black and white people will begin to work together and say, let's rebuild our country. Let's do business together. Let's make sure that jobs are created.
You asked for it, you got it. Welcome to the State of the Nation. I'm your host, Mike Sham. The State of the Nation brought to you in partnership with Pace Car Rental. Use our secret code Sona and get a discount. And as I started and said, you asked for it, you got it, and that is everybody's favorite analyst, Prince Mashele. Welcome to the State of the Nation, Prince.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure to be with you.
So the dust has settled a little. We know what the election result, how that turned out. And obviously a lot of speculation before, during, and now we're after about what South Africa would look like. There was a lot of talk about coalitions and moonshot pacts and doomsday scenarios. And now we have a government of national unity. What's your thoughts on the way this has played out, Prince?
Look, I've listened to the noise, and obviously it was deafening noise. What the noise has missed, in my view, is the bigger picture. In other words, what is the bigger picture of South Africa's political trajectory? That's what I think has been missing in the analysis. This is what I see. This is a big historic moment. That's the first thing. Why is it historic? It is because for the first time in 75 years, South Africa will not be controlled politically by one political party. In 75 years. That's huge. For 75 years, South Africa has been ruled by two political parties. People actually don't know that. The first was the National Party from 1948, which ruled South Africa for about 45 years. And then it handed over to the ANC, which ruled South Africa for 30 years. That's huge. So now we have entered a second period where the country is going to be controlled by a combination of political forces governing this country together. And that is what they call the government of national unity. And it's real. It's more real than the government of national unity of 1994, because the government of national unity of 1994 actually had a majority winner. The ANC got 62%. This time around, nobody has crossed the 50% mark, which means this is actually a real coalition government. And this has happened, as I said, for the first time in 75 years. That has implications in terms of the character of the country. One, it means that this arrangement that we have now is actually a mirror of South Africa. On the one hand, you have a component representing black people. That is the 40% of the ANC. I mean, let's be blunt about it. The ANC is a party that represents black people, doesn't represent white people. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you have a component that represents very legitimately white people. That is the DA. If you look at the numbers in South Africa in terms of the population, the DA is a legitimate party representing white people. Now, you are back to 1909. After the Anglo-Boer War, when the English and the Afrikaners, the enemies, realized that they have to have a conference and they have to co-govern South Africa together. That's exactly where we are. The enemies, the blacks and the whites who have been fighting under apartheid, right, now are forced to sit together and co-govern this country. And in my view, this is the best formula for South Africa. I don't care who says, who screams on the margins. Nobody will succeed governing South Africa alone. So if black people think that they can succeed, I can tell you the ANC over the past 30 years has actually proved itself to be dismal. They have failed. Even the apartheid forces, they thought that they could govern South Africa alone since 1948 until 1994. They also have failed. So the only formula for us is for black people and white people to govern together. So that's the bigger picture that I see.
Yeah, because the one common denominator between the nationalist government from 48 to 94 and ANC subsequently until now is that it was more defined by who was outside of the room. And in each case, it was really private business that sat outside of the tent, not really represented in those governments.
Yeah, true. Private business, by the way, not only in South Africa, all over the world, especially in the capitalist world, call it the liberal democratic world, that is the West. The hand of business, that is Adam Smith's invisible hand, is always there in politics. Because the reason why you cannot exclude business in that arrangement is because in order for you to run politics, you need money. And politics does not make money. It is business that makes money. So when there's an election, where do you go as a political party? You go to the Oppenheimers, you go to the Ruperts of this world, because you need money to run a campaign. So these guys are not in the business of dishing out money for free. When they give you money, they want to have a say as to how you constitute government after the election. So I am not surprised that throughout the history of this country, private business has always had a hand. And by the way, it's not only during the apartheid era or even under the ANC. Cecil John Rhodes drove South Africa's politics for the longest time under the English. The guy was a businessman, and there was a group of them in mining, the landlords, who drove South Africa's politics under the English. So yes, whether we like it or not, business has a hand in the evolution of our country's politics.
So now, Prince, before we get on the implications of the government of national unity, how it could help South Africa do better than what we have been doing certainly for the last 15. But, South Africa really has a lot of potential that hasn't been realized. Let's just spend some time talking about those that have been left out, because quite clearly there's a lot at stake, a lot on the table. But to leave out specifically Mkhonto Wesizwe and economic freedom fighters, EFF, Jacob Zuma, Julius Malema, to leave them outside of the tent, what do you make of that decision?
Yeah, the question is, who left them out? That's the question. You see, we must not make the mistake of creating a narrative that these people were left out. They were never left out. They actually opted out. Remember, to be part of the so-called government of national unity is a choice, ultimately. A political party chooses to be part of it or not to be part of it. As far as I am aware, and this is public, because the ANC told us who they met. They have met with the EFF. Cyril Ramaphosa had a one-on-one meeting with Julius Malema. Gwede Mantashe and Fikile Mbalula met with the leadership of Mkhonto Wesizwe. Ultimately, Mkhonto Wesizwe did not want to be part of this government of national unity if the DA is part of it. And that was the condition also presented by the economic freedom, the EFF. Now, that is a choice. And in a democracy, by the way, all of us are allowed to make a choice, including the EFF and Mkhonto Wesizwe. So you couldn't drag Mkhonto Wesizwe kicking and screaming and say, you shall be part of this government of national unity, whether you like it or not. You couldn't do that to the EFF. These are independent political parties. They make their own choice. But here is the thing about it. Maybe it is good that they're outside, because they are going to occupy the opposition space. They have defined themselves. They call themselves progressive caucus in parliament. So I'm actually very happy that in parliament you are still going to have a critical voice representing those who dissent from the government of national unity. But make no mistake, if you look at the numbers, this so-called government of national unity is actually a legitimate government. If you look at the numbers, they constitute more than 60% of the electorate. So if the EFF, if Umkhonto we Sizwe, if you, Mike, believe that in a democracy the majority rule, be happy that this government of national unity represents the majority of South Africans.
Yeah, quite clearly, some of the positions that both EFF and MK took have really, really come to pay a price. And top amongst them was that the ANC must get rid of Cyril Ramaphosa, which to my mind made it a non-starter that they would be involved in any case, because it's very difficult for me to say we're going to get into business, but first you must leave your wife. It's quite a big call, isn't it?
Yeah, unless if you have been having an affair with which is the case, by the way, with the EFF and Umkhonto we Sizwe. They have been having an affair with the ANC. Remember, the EFF is actually the ANC. I mean, let's be honest about it. We know who is the EFF. They come from the ANC. So they have been having talks with elements and factions in the ANC. That's what I call an affair, including the Umkhonto we Sizwe. Umkhonto we Sizwe is a party led and formed by Jacob Zuma, who is the former president of the ANC. So he has been having an affair with the ANC. So their demand was actually an attempt to say, comrades, and when they say comrades, they're referring to those who were in their factions when they were in the ANC. Let's remove this man because we've been trying. Now we can assist you from outside. So Umkhonto we Sizwe and the EFF must never be viewed as if these parties have no history with the ANC. They have history and they also have very deep connections. But you are correct. This demand that the leader of the ANC must resign if they were to be part of a coalition government with the ANC was impossible. I mean, who are they to tell another party that their leader must resign? Can you imagine if the ANC said, we are willing to talk to Umkhonto we Sizwe provided Jacob Zuma resigns? I mean, they would never accept a thing like that. And if they wouldn't accept a thing like that, why would they expect the ANC to accept an impossible demand like that? I think it was quite unreasonable.
Prince, I want to pick up on something that you said, because it is something that I think, I said that with the situation we find ourselves in is of no party getting an absolute majority and the death of the ANC supermajority. To my mind, isn't the end of South Africa, isn't the end of the new South Africa, it's the end of the beginning of the new South Africa.
Yeah, look, as I said earlier, South Africa comes from a history where one party runs the show. Right? And that formula actually has not worked, because what it meant that one component of the South African population must subdue and dominate the other. And that formula, as I said, hasn't worked. We are now entering a new era where all or most of the components constituting the South African population sit together in one boardroom and say, we are co-governing. That formula, by the way, was tried and tested by the English and the Afrikaners after the Anglo-Boer War, as I said, but it only addressed the minority component of the population, that is white people. Now, this formula, the electorate have broadened it and say, we want black people and white people to co-govern together. It's completely new in South Africa. And I think, for me, that is the best formula, because you want everyone to say, I represent this constituency, and this is what my constituency expects. You want everyone to have a voice. And it is only if everyone has a voice that you can, I think, you can build a better future. That's one. Number two, these components that are in the so-called government of national unity don't trust each other. And I like it, because it means that there is no one component of it that can say, let us steal money. If one component tries that, the other will say, no, you will not allow you to do that. That will apply in terms of corruption, but it will also apply in terms of competence. I mean, we know that the ANC's problems are two in the main. Incompetence, the ANC is an incompetent party. Just look at the record of the ANC in terms of how they've governed South Africa. You can see they've collapsed almost the entire state. They're incompetent. They are also corrupt. We know that. Go to look at Zondo Commission. Now, when you throw in the DA there, Yes, it is true. Historically, white people have stolen in South Africa. But if you look at how the DA has governed the Western Cape, by the way, even studies by the ANC government itself have found that the DA has actually been a better government in South Africa in terms of the provinces. In terms of the provinces. So it has a record of good governance in the Western Cape. So if you have a party like that in that mix, I think it's going to improve the performance in terms of governance.
I'd like to pick up on while we're talking governance. Most of the governance that touches the people who are watching this podcast, and as we understand, is done at the lowest level, at municipal level. Now, let's first talk about the big metros, because those metros, as we sit right now, are still governed by a pre-election arrangement with the ANC and the EFF and the Patriotic Alliance, with a puppet mayor in Johannesburg and a puppet mayor in Ekurhuleni, and even Nelson Mandela Bay, and you could chuck eThekwini into the mix. What do you think the implications are of the national election on the local government arrangements?
Look, I've said that this is the best arrangement at a national level because you've got blacks and whites in the same room governing the country. I think that formula must be taken also to the local government. Because, you are right. Local government is a mess. Take a city of Johannesburg. It's governed by a clown. This mayor, he has been told by the EFF and the ANC, you shall keep quiet, must never appear in public. So Johannesburg is on autopilot. We have problems of water here and so on and so forth. You need to get rid of that messy arrangement. The coalition government that has been struck at a national level must come down to a local government level so that we have stability. All we want as citizens, we want to have guaranteed supply of water, we want to have guaranteed supply of electricity, and we want to have normal lives. So I think that the implications would be, given that it has been struck at the national level, and in Gauteng it has been also struck at a provincial level, it must go down to the local level so that we have stability across the board from local all the way to national. And I think it's going to happen.
Yeah. So because the signs are there, we saw the firing of the EFF MMC for finance in Ekurhuleni, so quite clearly, and a few leaked sources have already said that this arrangement has to follow through. So I think the next couple of weeks are going to be interesting.
I can bet my last dime it will happen. The EFF will be ejected from Johannesburg. They will be ejected from Ekurhuleni, and I think it will be a good thing. Actually, the EFF, as far as I'm concerned, is a destructive force. They have no history of competence. They actually have a history of corruption. I always remind South Africans of this thing, that Julius Malema collapsed Limpopo with Castle Matale. So the EFF is actually a corrupt party. So they must be flushed out of our local government so that we can have normal life.
Yeah, I was listening to a report recently about South Africa having one of the highest rates of cigarette smoking, one of the few countries that are growing. Right, that cigarette smoking in South Africa is growing, and to me it's fairly obvious. We've got the backers of the EFF.
Yeah.
We know. Sell cigarettes and don't pay tax on it, so the price has dramatically dropped.
Yeah, look, we know that the EFF are sponsored by a very dodgy cigarette smugglers. This Julius Malema, by the way, has been living in a house paid for by cigarette smugglers. So this is not a holier than thou character. Julius Malema is a very corrupt man.
Okay, so now let's look at our government of national unity. About to be, as we record this, we know the president, we know the speakers. We haven't quite got to cabinet level, but quite obviously some of these parties are going to get a say in the way the country runs, isn't it?
They have to have a say. So the ANC got 40%, the DA 21%, and the PA 2%, and the IFP 3%. All of these parties will have to have a say. And I've been watching the press addresses by leaders of the parties. What I found interesting is the address given by John Steenhuisen, where he said, there shall be proportionality in terms of representation in government. So quite correct. The ANC will be the majority in terms of that arrangement. The DA will be the second biggest, and so on and so forth. That's how coalition governments work all over the world. So I expect that cabinet will have a good representation of the ANC, which is the biggest, and the DA and IFP and so on. What I expect, by the way, and this is me speaking as a South African citizen, knowing that the ANC is an incompetent party and that they have collapsed the state, how I wish they would be given the Ministry of Sports, something like that. They must never be given anything that has got to do with public enterprises because they have collapsed ESCOM. I want electricity in my house. So I hope that parties like the DA would be given public enterprises. They would be given finance, for example, trade and industry. The ministries that make things work in South Africa. You need competence there. We are sick and tired as South Africans of incompetence. So I don't know the bargaining, how it's going to go, but how I wish and hope that this time around they would agree that the best person must get the best job so that we can address our problems.
Now, that does raise concerns, because if you have a very influential coterie of DA ministers, predominantly white, their hands on the levers of power where it really matters, are we not feeding ammunition to Mkhonto Wesizwe EFF to destabilize this government?
No, you are feeding ammunition for Mkhonto Wesizwe and the EFF to make a lot of noise, not to destabilize. Remember, the outcomes of the elections reflect the will of the South African population. So, and people have been attempting to delegitimize the outcomes of the elections. South Africans have voted in their majority for the ANC and the DA. That's not, Mkhonto Wesizwe got 14%, the EFF got 9%. That's not the majority. It's a voice in South Africa, and it must be listened to that voice. So they will continue to make noise, but those who are in government, their responsibility will be to govern, must not be disturbed by noise. Remember, I'm not suggesting that the ANC must not be part of this government. They will be part of this government. The president of the country is the president of the ANC. So they will have a huge influence on the government. So I am suggesting simply that you need to give key positions to competent human beings in that cabinet. And I am saying the ANC, and if you think I'm wrong, just look at what the ANC did to ESCOM, look at what the ANC did to public enterprises. And I'm saying the ANC, it has proven itself competent. Ideally, it must not be allowed to touch those critical ministries. If there's another person who's got a counter view, who thinks that those critical ministries must be given to incompetent ministers from the ANC, they are free to advance that argument. I mean, we live in a democracy. I happen not to believe in that.
Let's have a look at how this could play out. What do you expect now that we've got a good result that we feel is a good result for South Africa? We've got people in the tent. We've got perhaps the competence that we need. What do you expect South Africa to look like in the short and medium term? We can't talk long term because there's going to be an election after that, but certainly, what would you say the initial impact is going to be?
Well, my sense is that there is a positive sentiment on the part of the majority of South Africans. And you know what? Don't be distracted by what you hear Mkhonto Wesizwe and EFF say. I listen to South Africans on the ground. I mean, I go to the villages and I go to townships. I have a house in a township in Mkhuhlu. I listen to my neighbors, right? They are very encouraged by the outcome of the elections, and they want white and black people to co-govern together. So what do I expect to see? I expect that South Africans on the ground, they will now have hope that they can fix things where they live and in their country. That ordinary people will start to work to try and fix things. And I hope that spirit will actually cascade into the private sector as well, where black and white people will begin to work together and say, Let's rebuild our country. Let's do business together. Let's make sure that jobs are created. So that's on a society, on the society side. On this part of government, I know that this government is not going to achieve miracles, but at least I hope that it will address basics. And the basics are not complicated. Fix ESCOM. Let's have reliable supply of electricity. Let's have a reliable supply of water. Fix Transnet. Let's transport whatever we are mining to the ports efficiently. Fix the schools in the townships where black people live so that there is a culture of schooling and good quality education there. If you get those basics right, let's fix public health, hospitals. When you go to hospitals in the townships and the rural areas, let the hospitals be clean, let there be medication, let people be healed. If you get those basics right, I think the rest of South Africans in the private space will do things for themselves. So I hope that in the short term, that's what we are going to see. If we don't see that, I'll be hugely disappointed.
Yeah, because the one thing in what you said is that intangible that I know a lot of people, by now South Africans are numb. We've been through a lot, especially over the last 15 years. But optimism plays a massive role. It plays a massive role domestically. If you feel that the future is going to be better than the past, you'll go and fix your house, you'll mow your lawn, you'll make the world a better place. If you feel that the outcome is going to be the opposite, you just survive. You don't really care about it. If it's all going to go to hell, why should I bother to repair this broken thing? Or why should I make the country a better place if it's going to ultimately, not progress? And of course, as we know, the international community is massively underinvested in South Africa. So we could start seeing a reversal of the outflow of money from South Africa, as we saw with Shell and Billiton and some of these big companies that have recently disinvested.
Look, two things that you say. One, you are right about optimism. People want to feel that the future is brighter than the present. And one of the things that make people feel like that, it's for them to feel that they are part of the solution. So when you have an arrangement like we have, where you have all of us represented in that arrangement, I mean, if you are black, you are represented by the ANC and IFP and PA. If you are white, you are represented by the DA. So if you feel that you are part of it, you will work harder to make it succeed. And I think that there is a basis for optimism when you look at the arrangement we have. And that applies to investment. Remember, investment has got two components. Number one, it has got a domestic component, and it's important. There are rich people in South Africa, and this is public, who are sitting on cash piles. They have not been investing their money. They live here in South Africa. They've got lots of cash. They have not been investing because they had no faith in the government of the ANC, the way things were going. And I think they were quite correct, by the way, if you look at how the ANC has been stealing money and ravaging the state. Now, they must lead by example. The Ruperts of this world, the Oppenheimers of this world, must lead by example and begin to reinvest in the South African economy. This is their country. If they don't do it, outsiders are not going to flock and invest their money. Actually, foreign investment is led by domestic investment. That's how it works all over the world, by the way. So the outsiders are going to look at the behavior of our rich people in South Africa. Are they going back to invest in the economy? If they do, I think the outsiders can have confidence that we can put our money in the project. It's like if you and I have a project, Mike. If you say to me, Prince, I have a project, let's invest, I would ask, how much money are you putting yourself? If you are not putting a cent, I'm not going to put my cent. But you must show me that you have confidence in this project, then I can invest. I think that's how it works. But here is the thing. When we talk about investment in South Africa, we have this old idea of the West, by the way. We don't factor in the new dynamics in the world. And the new dynamics in the world is that the economy of the future in the world, it's no longer the West. It's no longer America. It is actually China. It is the East. China is the second largest economy in the world as we speak. And all economists, by the way, when they do forecasting, they project that China at some point in the next 10 to 15 years, it will overtake the US. So we must begin to think about China as a source of investment. And we must imagine how different that kind of investment and economic engagement with China will be, different from the Western model of sucking our mineral resources out of Africa to be beneficiated in Europe, and they come back to us in the form of value-add products. We cannot continue to have that kind of relationship. But that means we must do something internally. We must up our skills game. We must up our tech game in South Africa if we are going to redefine our engagement with investment partners outside South Africa.
Yeah, you could say that that the model is very different. There is no doubt. To me, the real difference is that the West demands a certain political compliance, whereas the East doesn't. The Chinese investment is not dependent upon free elections or open societies.
Yeah.
But they also extract minerals, and they also send back beneficiated products. You would argue a lot more than what the West does.
Yeah, here's a point about foreign investors. All of them, whether West or East, they want to suck resources out of that country.
They want to make a profit.
Period. That's how it works. Yes, they want to make a period. So this idea of thinking of investors as philanthropists, it doesn't work. Whether American, whether Chinese, they want our money to take it to China or to take it to America. That's normal. And we as South Africans, we have a responsibility to govern ourselves the way we deem fit. And South Africans, I think, are actually Democrats at heart. We are noisy. Listen to our discourse publicly. This idea of us being repressed, we don't like it. We don't like it in our relationship with the outsiders. We also don't like it in our relationship with our own local leaders. So it is our responsibility to define our governance model and let outsiders stay out of it. We are not a democracy because the Americans and the British told us to be a democracy. We are a democracy because we fought in the liberation struggle to say we want to be a democracy. And it is not the West that says we must fight in the liberation struggle. We said, no, we want to be a democracy. So whether China says something about our governance model or not, it's not their business. Yeah. It is our business to define how we want to govern ourselves.
Now, Prince, we've spent a lot of time talking about the potential here on the upside and how this could be a watershed moment where South Africans get together with common purpose, turn this big ship around that's kind of been sinking, never mind going into the wrong direction. But there's also a chance here. We're making some big assumptions, aren't we? We're making big assumptions that everybody will govern within the spirit that this government of national unity, our understanding of this government of national unity. But let's understand here that 30 years in, many people within the ANC have never, ever had to account for their actions, for their corruption, for their malfeasance, nothing. Suddenly, you could have a situation where, and I've made this point that I'm not 100% sure that even as we sit here today, the ANC understands what life will look like when business is resumed, right? Because suddenly you can't just wipe Pala away, or this corruption or that corruption, or put a bad guy into parliament. There's going to be that accountability. Now, the problem with that is that it all sounds wonderful. The problem is that there are some people who may prefer not to have that accountability, and this could put this government of national unity at risk. What do you think? Do you see that element within the ANC that decides that now that we've raised the bar, that it's just too high, we can join up with MK later, we can subvert what we've got and go under the bar rather than go over the bar?
Look, you are quite correct. I mean, this is public. Helen Zille announced it yesterday, actually, that part of the deal that they've signed with the ANC is that the Democratic Alliance would never vote to impeach the president, even if the Phala matter were to arise again in parliament. So the DA has committed itself that is going to suppress accountability. This must be made very clear. So the DA itself, ipso facto, is unaccountable. But I don't think that this arrangement is going to protect unaccountability in a blanket fashion. I'm encouraged by things that I'm seeing in the public. A guy like Zizi Kodwa is already facing a judge. Nosivuya Mapisa Ngakula is already facing a judge. I think the NPA must be the happiest agency given the arrangement, because they can see that nobody controls the whole thing entirely. I hope and wish that they will take advantage of it to do their work properly. And if they do their work properly without fear of favor, nobody is going to be protected. That's my hope, that state institutions now will bite, because they will appreciate that no one is going to frustrate them. And I don't think the ANC and the DA and the IFP can agree together and say, let's suppress the NPA. I don't think that will happen.
No, but there must got to be a chance, one would imagine, especially if one goes back to the Scorpions days, when many Democrats, many South Africans were delighted to see a muscular body going after politicians that were stealing money. Turns out that the politicians weren't so keen on that. And we do understand that the ANC had a majority and they could kill off the Scorpions back then, right, to stop legal action. Well, that exit strategy still exists, still on the table. The ANC could coalesce, could break this agreement, go in with Jacob Zuma, who's obviously just started this party to keep himself out of jail. EFF clearly are not that keen on applying the law. And once again, just, if the NPA does get ahead of itself, starts putting people in jail, it starts being some of the comrades. Perhaps, do you not see an enticement for the ANC to go back to these other parties?
Yeah, here is the thing. This arrangement is not a marriage made in heaven. So there was no God involved in this. must be clear about it. It can collapse. Like any other marriage, when people get married, there's a beautiful wedding and you think this is going to last forever. Marriages do collapse. Even this marriage can collapse. And if this marriage were to collapse, we can imagine what would happen. I mean, when marriages collapse, people do get remarried. So there's a room, if this marriage were to collapse, for the ANC to collaborate with MK and the EFF. They can constitute a government. If that happens, there is nothing as voters we can do, because these are elite pacts. The ANC would have to proceed along those lines and expect that voters would decide 5 years later. Fortunately, we live in a democracy. There would be an opportunity for us as voters to react. But I think that the ANC would be shooting itself in the foot if it were to do something like that. The reason why it was punished, in my view, it was punished because black people, the majority of this country, were sick and tired of corruption and incompetence. So if the ANC were to take South Africa again in the direction of corruption and incompetence, I think that would be the end of the party. So it's up to the ANC to decide.
So now, Prince, in 2014, you wrote The Fall of the ANC, which back then almost looked crazy to even consider, and you got it right. You mentioned 2024. It's your predictions were really on the money. Now, I want us to just spend this last time in looking at the implications going forward, good and bad. Let's hope and pray this government of national unity works. South Africa goes through a period of renewal. The economy starts growing, jobs start being created. What does the 2029 elections look like?
Yeah. By the way, I think we need to temper our optimism. I said I'm encouraged by this, but we must be realistic. It's not going to happen that way. Yes. No. The best we are going to get is the lowest common denominator. So if you're a supporter of the DA, don't think you are going to get the DA manifesto out of this arrangement. It's not going to happen because the ANC is going to put on brakes. If you're a supporter of the ANC, don't think you're going to get the manifesto of the ANC out of this arrangement. You are going to get a bit of the DA, a bit of the ANC, a bit of the IFP, and so on. That's what we are going to get, in my view. And now, that will be better than what was actually happening under the ANC. The ANC was actually running South Africa aground. So South Africa is going to improve by degree, not by a mile. So what does 2029 look like if my scenario comes to pass? I think we are going to see the DA improving a bit electorally because people will believe that this thing has been working because of the entry of the DA. So you will have the DA improving electorally. You would likely have the ANC also improving marginally to about 45%, thereabout, if this thing were to work. That's where I think things would happen. But if Jacob Zuma is still alive, you would also see Umkhonto weSizwe gaining, because those who are angry would say, let's disturb the arrangement. And you would have the EFF hovering almost where they are. So I am saying we are in for a long period of coalition governments in South Africa. My projection, and I'm reckless when it comes to this thing, I put my neck on the block, is that for the next a minimum of 20 years, South Africa will be under a coalition government. 20 years. So if you are like me, you are almost 50, you will hit 70 under a coalition government. And this, by the way, is not strange. If you look at Western Europe, you look at countries like Germany, for example, look at countries like Spain, like Italy, that they are used to this kind of a thing I'm talking about. So that's what I see when I look at the medium term and long term. It's a country that is under a coalition government for a minimum of 20 years. So I don't see one party in 2029 winning the elections.
Okay, and if it does work, you're saying that there's going to still be enough people outside that would want to disrupt to maintain the current sort of support that the MK and EFF have?
Yeah, there will be. Especially the MK and the EFF. Remember, what the MK and the EFF are hoping for, they are hoping that as the ANC dies, those who used to vote for the ANC, black people, will now shift to the EFF. And the MK also hopes that they will shift to itself. So they are praying that come 2029, that shift will constitute a majority. In other words, the EFF and the MK will constitute a majority. They will cross the 50% mark. My goodness, if that were to happen, they will be the happiest human beings under the sun. That's what they are hoping. I don't think it will happen that fast. And Jacob Zuma is, by the way, he's old. Is not going to live long enough to see that happening. And the day he dies, and of course as a human being, he will die. Let me tell you, that will be the end of the thing called Umkhonto weSizwe Party. By the way, this Umkhonto weSizwe Party, I've said it before, and I don't care what they say. It's not a party. It's a personal property of Jacob Zuma and his family. There are no structures there. I mean, they speak with many mouths. You actually don't know who to believe in that whole ensemble. So the day Jacob Zuma dies, that whole thing is going to crumble like a house of cards. So that means anybody who thinks that South Africa is moving in the direction of Umkhonto weSizwe in the EFF, that person is dreaming. It's not going to happen that way.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from the one and only Prince. I think we should upgrade him to a king, but...
Oh no.
Prince Mashele giving us some wonderful words of wisdom. I just want to leave you with one thing. I just want to ask one question, because we do make assumptions in South Africa and one can understand where they come from. One of the things I don't understand, why do we assume that either the EFF or MK would want to go back to the ANC? I've never seen a breakaway party ever reform with a party.
Yeah, look, actually, that's not the game that they are playing.
Right.
The game they are playing, they want the ANC to collapse into them. It's not the other way around. The strategy of the EFF is that the ANC ultimately will collapse into the EFF. It's not the other way around. The people who assume that the EFF and Umkhonto want to go back to the ANC, they are wrong. They want the ANC to fold into MK and fold into the EFF.
Yeah.
That is the game. And if you look at the shift, those who have voted for the EFF and who have voted for MK, in the main, those are people who used to vote for the ANC. So in other words, the theory of MK and the EFF, so far it's working, even though I predict in the long term it's going to collapse.
Well, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Prince Mashele. South Africa has its best chance, in our opinion, certainly in 70 years of becoming the country that can be a place for all of us to prosper. Let's hope we're right. Prince Mashele, thank you so much for joining us. To Pace Car Rental, thank you for supporting us. To everybody out there, like and subscribe. We are growing nicely. And by the time the next election comes along, we could be the biggest party, State of the Nation party.
Maybe I'll be a king.
Maybe you could be a king, yeah. I know, you keep on talking about old people and dying. I don't know. I was going to get to the next election. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again in the State of the Nation.